Dust devils danced across the sun-baked plains like restless ghosts, kicking up red earth that stung the eyes and choked the throat. Elias Thorne reined in his horse at the edge of Rattlesnake Gulch, the town that time forgot. It was late afternoon, and the sky bled orange over the jagged horizon, painting the weathered saloons and sagging porches in firelight. He wiped sweat from his brow with a calloused hand, his Stetson casting a shadow that hid the hollows under his eyes. Elias was 34, broad-shouldered, and weathered like the cottonwoods that clung to the dry riverbed. His ranch lay 5 miles out. A stubborn patch of green wrestled from the dirt by sheer will and a dead wife's memory. Sarah. Her name still tasted like ash on his tongue. 3 years gone, taken by the fever that swept the territory like a biblical plague. He'd buried her under the old oak, with nothing but a wooden cross and the wind for company. Since then, the loneliness had settled in his bones, heavier than the .45 slung low on his hip. He'd placed the ad on a whim, scribbled in the dim light of his lantern after one too many whiskeys at the Golden Spur, rancher seeks companion. Hard work, honest life. Must not mind dust or distance. Words on paper, flung into the void like a prayer to a god who'd long since turned his back. He hadn't expected a reply. Reckoned it was just a way to quiet the echoes in his empty cabin. But the letter came, postmarked from St. Louis, penned in a hand as steady as a preacher's. Widow 28, seeking new roots in fertile soil. No children, willing to share burdens. Clara Hayes. The name rolled through his mind like thunder over the mesa. Now, here he was, waiting at the stagecoach stop, heart thumping like a Mustang's hooves against his ribs. The coach rattled in from the east, a dust-caked beast hauled by 4 lathered horses. It lurched to a halt, and the door creaked open. She stepped down first. Clara Hayes was no fragile eastern flower. Her boots hit the ground with purpose, kicking up a puff of dirt that settled on the hem of her travel-worn calico dress. Russet hair escaped her bonnet in wild curls, catching the dying sun like embers. Her eyes, green as spring grass after a rare rain, scanned the sparse crowd. A grizzled prospector, 2 drifters nursing hangovers, and him. Elias touched the brim of his hat. "Ma'am." Elias Thorne. She turned, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. Up close, she carried the faint scent of lavender soap and train smoke, a whisper of civilization in this godforsaken sprawl. "Clara Hayes," she said, her voice steady but laced with that eastern lilt, softened by sorrow. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Thorne." He nodded, awkward as a colt in traces. "Reckon the journey was a long one. Got your trunk?" "Just the one." She gestured to the battered valise the driver tossed down. Elias hefted it onto his shoulder without a word, leading her to where his bay mare stood tethered. "We'll ride double. Safer that way till we clear the gulch." Clara hesitated, glancing at the horizon where coyotes yipped their evening chorus. Then she nodded, gathering her skirts. "Lead on, then." He helped her up, his hands rough around her waist, strong, but gentle, like he was afraid she'd shatter. She settled behind him, one arm looping tentatively around his middle for balance. The horse shifted under their weight, and they were off, hooves thudding a slow rhythm against the hardpan. The wind tugged at them as they rode, carrying the low moan of sagebrush and the distant low of cattle. Elias felt her warmth against his back, a foreign fire in the chill that had gripped him for years. "Town ain't much," he said over his shoulder, voice gruff to mask the tremor. "But the ranch, it's home, or what's left of one." "I've seen worse," Clara replied softly. "The war took my husband, left me with a farm that bled money and memories I couldn't plow under. Your ad, it felt like a door cracking open." He swallowed hard. "War widow." The words hung between them like gunsmoke. "Lost mine to fever. Sarah, best woman I ever knew." The admission slipped out unbidden, raw as a fresh brand. Pause for drama. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her breath warm against his neck. "Grief's a thief, ain't it? Steals the color from everything." Elias grunted, urging the horse faster. They crested a rise, and the ranch unfolded below, a low-slung adobe house with a sagging porch, a corral of split rails, and fields stitched with barbed wire. Smoke curled from the chimney. His foreman, old Jed, had lit the fire as instructed. Chickens scratched in the yard, and a lone dog lifted its head, barking once before settling. They dismounted in the gathering dusk. Elias carried her trunk inside, the door groaning on leather hinges. The cabin was sparse. A plank table scarred from years of use, an iron stove humming with heat, 2 chairs by the hearth. A quilt Sarah had stitched draped the lone bed in the corner, its blues faded to gray. Clara set down her reticule, taking it in with quiet eyes. It's sturdy, honest. She turned to him, and in the firelight, her face softened, shadows playing across cheekbones sharp from lean times. Thank you for this chance, Elias. He busied himself with coffee, pouring tin mugs from a pot on the stove. Ain't no charity, darlin'. We both need something. Reckon we start slow. You take the bed. I'll bunk in the barn till we sort things. Her lips quirked, a ghost of a smile. Darlin', that's a bold word for day one. He crept up his neck. Habit. Sarah, she liked it. He handed her the mug, their fingers brushing. A spark jumped, quick as dry lightning. He pulled back, cursing himself. This wasn't why he'd sent the ad. Not for sparks. Not for the ache that bloomed at his chest like a bruise. They sat by the fire that night, the flames roaring up the chimney like a lion's roar tamed to embers. Jed had left stew, rabbit and beans, thick with onions, and they ate in companionable silence at first, the only sounds the pop of sapwood and the wind rattling the shutters. Tell me about her, Clara said finally, setting her bowl aside. Her eyes held his, steady and searching. Sarah. Elias stared into the fire, the light flickering across his jaw, tight with old pain. Met her in Abilene. She was a schoolmarm, fresh from Boston. Thought I was a roughneck not worth her time. He chuckled low, a rumble like distant thunder. But she saw something. We built this place together, laughed over burnt biscuits, danced in the yard when the rains came. His voice cracked, just a hair. Then the fever hit hard. I held her through the nights, wiping her brow till my hands cramped. Buried her at dawn. Slow, tense pause. Clara reached across the table, her hand covering his. Her touch was cool, steadying. You didn't fail her, Elias. Sometimes the West just takes. He turned his palm up, lacing fingers with hers before he could think better. And you, your man, Thomas. She withdrew gently, folding her hands in her lap. Shadows deepened in her eyes. Artilleryman. Lost an arm at Gettysburg. Came home hollow. We tried for a life in Missouri, cornfields and quiet. But the bottle took him, slow and sure. One night, he wandered into the river. They said accident. I know better. The words landed heavy, like stones in still water. Elias wanted to pull her close, shield her from the ghosts that mirrored his own. But he didn't. Not yet. Reckon we're both scarred timber. Might make a crooked house, but it'll stand. She smiled then, faint but real, and the room warmed. They talked late into the night, about the stars wheeling overhead, brighter than city lamps, about the wild mustangs that thundered across the flats at moonrise, about dreams deferred, like children that might never come. Her laughter came easy when he spun tales of rustlers and saloon brawls, her hand brushing his arm as she leaned in. By the time the fire died to coals, something shifted. A thread pulled taut between them, fragile as spider silk. Elias watched her braid her hair by candlelight, the motion hypnotic, and felt the loneliness crack, just a little. Hope, unbidden, flickered like the flame. The days blurred into a rhythm carved from the land itself. Dawn broke with rooster crow and coffee black as sin. Elias showed Clara the ropes, mending fences under a merciless sun, herding strays back to the corral, drawing water from the windmill that creaked like an old man's bones. She took to it fierce, her hands blistering then callousing, her dress streaked with earth. No complaints, just that quiet determination, like she'd been forged in the same fire that shaped the canyons. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the plains in strokes of crimson and gold, they rode out to check the northern pasture. The air hummed with cicadas, thick and lazy. Elias reined up on a bluff overlooking the valley, where the river, little more than a silver ribbon, wound through cottonwoods heavy with leaves. "Beautiful, ain't it?" he said, dismounting to help her down. His hands lingered at her waist, thumbs tracing the curve of her hips through the fabric. She didn't pull away. Clara gazed out, wind teasing loose strands across her face, like God's own canvas. "Back east, everything's hemmed in fences, folks, regrets. Here." She trailed off, turning to him. Their eyes locked, and the air thickened, charged as a storm front. He stepped closer, drawn like iron to lodestone. "Clara." She rose on tiptoe, her lips brushing his cheek, soft, tentative. "Elias, I." A gunshot cracked the silence, sharp as a whip. Elias shoved her behind him, drawing his Colt in a blur. The echo rolled across the plains, and in the distance, a rider spurred away, dust plume rising like a taunt. "Stay low," he growled, scanning the horizon. His heart hammered, not just from fear. That kiss, unclaimed, unfinished, hung between them, a promise shattered. "Who was that?" Clara whispered, her hand fisting in his shirt. "Damned if I know. But they weren't I mean to miss." They rode back hard, the sunset bleeding into twilight. At the ranch, Elias barricaded the door, loading his rifle by lamplight. Clara paced, green eyes stormy. This the welcome the West gives, then? Bullets instead of ballads. He pulled her into his arms, fierce and sudden. "I won't let it touch you. Swear it." She melted against him, head on his shoulder, and for a moment, the world outside faded. His lips found her temple, then her mouth, slow, searching. She tasted of salt and sage, and he drowned in it, the kiss deepening like roots into parched soil. Hands roamed, breaths mingled, the cabin shrinking to the press of bodies. But the shot lingered in his mind, a serpent in Eden. Who? Why? Rattlesnake Gulch had its share of grudges, land disputes, old feuds, but this felt personal. Too close. That night, as thunder grumbled on the horizon, Elias lay awake on his barn pallet, staring at the rafters. Clara slept in the cabin, her presence a balm and a torment. He'd fallen, hard and heedless, into those eyes that laugh. But love in the West was a loaded gun, beautiful till it went off. Morning brought rain, a rare mercy pattering the roof, like hesitant fingers. Elias rose early, kissing Clara's forehead before slipping out. She stirred, murmuring his name, and he ached with it. Over biscuits and bacon, they spoke little of the shot, but tension coiled tight as a spring. Jed met him at the corral, chewing tobacco, face creased like old leather. "Heard the bang last night, boss. Sounded like a Winchester. You see the varmint?" "Nope, but it spooked the lady." Elias saddled up. "Keep an eye. I'll ride into town, ask around." Rattlesnake Gulch buzzed under the downpour, mud sucking at boot heels. The Golden Spurs bat-winged doors slapped in the wind. Inside, the air reeked of stale beer and wet dog. Preacher Hale nursed a sarsaparilla at the bar, his Bible dog-eared. Outlaws and ranchers hunched over cards, smoke curling like accusations. Elias bellied up, ordering whiskey. "Anybody hear a shot up north last eve?" Eyes flicked his way, then away. Tension rippled, thick as the rain outside. Finally, Buck Harlan, saloon owner with a scar like a lightning bolt across his cheek, leaned in. "Heard whispers, Thorne. Folks saying you got a new bride. Some reckon she's trouble. Widow Hayes rings bells." Elias's gut twisted. "What bells?" Buck shrugged, pouring another finger. "Her man, Thomas. Wasn't just the bottle took him. Word from Missouri. He owed big to rail barons. Gambling debts. They say she ran after the funeral. Took something that weren't hers. A pouch of gold, maybe. Or worse." The whiskey soured in Elias's mouth. Lies. Or truth slithering in. He thought of her touch, her tears by the fire. No, couldn't be. But doubt seeded, dark and thorny. He rode home through sheets of rain, the plains a blur of gray. Clara waited on the porch, shawl clutched tight, rain dripping from the eaves like tears. "Any news?" He dismounted, water sheeting off his hat. "Nothing solid. Just talk." Her face paled. "About me?" Slow, tense pause. Elias, I swear. A second shot rang out, closer this time, wood splintered above her head. She screamed, crumpling as Elias tackled her to the mud-slick ground. Bullets whined, one grazing his arm, hot bloom of blood. He fired blind into the storm, roaring. The shooter vanished into the sheets of rain, a phantom. But as Elias cradled Clara, her eyes wide with terror, a glint caught his eye in the dirt by her hand. A fallen locket, chain snapped. He snatched it up, thumbing it open. Inside, a miniature portrait, Thomas Hayes, stern-faced, and tucked behind it, a crumpled note, ink blurred but legible. The gold is mine. Come west, or the truth follows. His blood ran cold. Betrayal, sharp as a blade. Who are you, Clara? He whispered, voice breaking. What have you brought to my door? She reached for him, tears mingling with rain. But he pulled back, the locket burning in his fist. The storm raged on, and so did the fracture between them. Pause for drama. The rain hammered the roof, like judgment from on high, turning the yard to a quagmire that swallowed boot prints whole. Elias Thorne sat by the hearth, the locket heavy in his palm, its gold mocking the fire's glow. Blood crusted his arm where the bullet had kissed flesh, a shallow furrow he'd bound with a rag from the saddlebag. Pain throbbed, but it paled against the ache in his chest, a raw, gaping wound. Clara huddled in the corner chair, wrapped in a wool blanket, her face ashen as the ghosts that haunted these walls. The cabin felt smaller now, walls closing in like the jaws of a trap. Outside, lightning forked the sky, illuminating the plains in stark white flashes, thunder chasing like an avenging rider. He dragged her inside after the shot, barricading the door with the heavy oak table. Jed had skedaddled to town for the sheriff, leaving them alone in the storm's roar. Now, silence stretched taut between them, broken only by the drip of water from her sodden curls. Talk, Elias said finally, voice low and edged with gravel. He tossed the locket onto the table. It skittered, spinning to a halt. That note, the gold. Start from the beginning, Clara, and don't reckon on fairy tales. She lifted her chin, green eyes stormy as the weather outside. It's not what you think, Elias. Thomas. He was drowning in debt long before the river claimed him. Railmen, vultures in pinstripes, came collecting. He pawned everything. The farm, the silver, even my wedding band. Her voice cracked, fingers twisting the blanket's fringe. One night, desperate, he hit a stagecoach outside Jefferson City. Took a strongbox. Hid it in the root cellar. $50 in gold eagles. Said it was our salvation. Elias leaned forward, elbows on knees, the firelight carving shadows across his face. And you knew all this? Not at first. She swallowed, gaze dropping to the floorboards, scarred from Sarah's dances. He told me after, swore it was a one-time sin. We'd flee west, start clean. But the bottle twisted him worse. Fights. Rages. Then the river. Pause for emotion. I found the gold when I sold the farm. Hid it in my trunk, thinking it could buy a future. A way out. When your ad came, it felt like fate. Not theft. Redemption. He barked a laugh, bitter as wormwood. Redemption? That shooter's after your salvation, darlin'. And now he's painting my ranch red with it. He stood, pacing the room like a caged wolf, boots thudding soft on the rug. The kiss from the bluff replayed in his mind, her lips soft, yielding, the way she'd sighed his name. Lies, or half-truths wrapped in longing. Clara rose too, blanket pooling at her feet. She crossed to him, close enough to feel the heat rolling off his skin. Elias, look at me. Her hand cupped his jaw, turning his face. Thunder rattled the windows, but her touch grounded him. I came here for you. Not the gold. Your words in that ad. They spoke to the empty places in me. A man who knew loss, who built from ruins. I thought, maybe we could rebuild together. He searched her eyes, hunting for deceit, finding only raw plea. His resolve cracked just a hair. And if the truth outs, town'll string us both up. Me for harboring a robber's widow. You for the sin. Then we face it, she whispered, thumb tracing his scar-roughed cheek. Together. I've run long enough. Their breaths mingled, the air thick with unsaid wants. Elias's hand found her waist, pulling her flush against him. The kiss came fierce, born of storm and sorrow, a clash of teeth and tongues, hands fisting in wet hair and shirt fronts. She tasted of rain and regret, and he drank deep, as if she could wash the doubt away. They broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed. Clara. His voice was a rumble, wrecked. I can't lose another. Not like Sarah. You won't. She kissed his palm, then the pulse at his wrist. Let me stay. Let me prove it. Lightning flashed, sealing the vow in silver light. Jed burst through the door at dawn, dripping and wild-eyed, with Sheriff Amos in tow, a lanky lawman with a mustache like a broom bristle. The rain had eased to a drizzle, the world steaming under a pallid sun. Elias met them on the porch, Clara at his side. Her hand slipped into his like an anchor. Found tracks. Amos grunted, spitting tobacco juice into the mud. Led to the old mine shaft. Shooter hightailed it, but left this. He held up a brass cartridge casing, etched with initials, Th. Thomas Hayes. Clara's grip tightened. He must have followed me. One of the rail men, maybe. Hired gun. Amos eyed her sharp. Heard the whispers, ma'am. Your man's past catching up. Elias stepped forward, jaw set. She's with me now. Whatever ghost she's dragging, we face him square. You got a posse. The sheriff nodded slow. Riding out at noon. But Thorne, this blows back on you. It's your noose too. Let it. Elias's voice brooked no argument. She's worth it. As the men rode off, Clara turned to him, eyes shining. You believe me? Reckon I do. He pulled her close, the drizzle beating on their lashes. Or maybe I'm just a fool for green eyes and grit. The days that followed were a forge, hammering their fragile bond into something tempered and true. Elias taught her to shoot, his Colt heavy in her hands, the recoil jolting her shoulders as she peppered the corral fence with lead. Squeeze, don't jerk, he'd murmur, arms around her from behind, chin on her shoulder. Her laughter rang out when she winged a tin can, bright as birdsong over the plains. Evenings by the campfire became ritual. They'd sit under stars thick as spilled sugar, flames roaring high, casting golden halos. Elias spun yarns of his youth, rustling cattle with wild Comanche, outrunning twisters that tore barns to splinters. Clara shared her own, quilting bees in Missouri, Thomas's rare sober songs on the porch swing. One night, as coyotes yodeled their serenade, she leaned against him, head on his chest. The fire popped, embers swirling like fireflies. I was afraid of this, she confessed softly, opening up. Thought it'd just lead to more graves. Elias tilted her chin, thumb brushing her lip. The West ain't kind, darlin'. But it's honest. And you're the first honest thing I've touched since Sarah. He kissed her then, slow and deep, the world fading to the crackle of wood and the beat of hearts sinking like wagon wheels. But shadows lingered. Whispers slithered into town. The widow's curse, the rancher's folly. Buck Harlan cornered Elias at the spur one dusty afternoon. Folks talking boycott, Thorne. No beef buys till you clear out the trouble. That gold's blood money. Elias slammed his fist on the bar, glass shattering. Mind your pouring, Buck. My spread's clean. And Clara's mine. The saloon fell quiet, cards frozen mid-deal. Harlan backed off, muttering, but the seed of unrest took root. Then came the posse's return, empty-handed, but bearing ill tidings. The shooter, a hard case named Rafe Colton, had been sighted holed up in the Badlands, nursing a gut wound from Elias's return fire. He's vowing vengeance, Amos reported over coffee in the cabin. Says the widow owes for her man's sins, gold or blood. Clara paled, but her spine straightened. Let him come. I'm done running. That night, as the full moon silvered the plains, Elias and Clara rode out to the bluff, their bluff, where the first kiss had bloomed. The air was crisp, scented with juniper and promise. They spread a blanket, sharing jerky and a flask of whiskey, the horizon a velvet bruise, fading to stars. I love you, he said, the words tumbling out like stones from a landslide. Simple. True. Didn't plan on it. But there it is. Clara's eyes welled, moonlight catching the tears. And you, Elias. From that first ride, feeling your heartbeat steady under my hand. She traced his lips with her finger. We're scarred but whole. Together. Their lovemaking came natural as breathing. Slow at first, hands mapping scars and curves by starlight. Clothes shed like old skins. Bodies joining in a rhythm older than the land. Whispers and gasps wove with the night wind, redemption in every touch. Afterward, tangled in the blanket, her head on his chest, Elias felt peace settle, deep as well water. But the West don't grant peace easy. Dawn broke bloody, the sun clawing over the mesa. Hoofbeats thundered, Rafe Colton, gaunt and wild-eyed, bursting from the scrub with two rough riders flanking. guns drawn, faces twisted with greed and grudge. Elias met them in the yard, shotgun leveled, Clara at his side with the Colt steady in her grip. Jed flanked them, rifle barking. Lead flew thick, splintering rails and pinging off the windmill. Elias's shoulder burned as a slug tore through, but he fired true, dropping one rider in a heap. Rafe spurred straight for Clara, eyes mad. The gold, bitch. For Thomas's debt. She didn't flinch. Thomas paid with his life. Take your vengeance to hell. Her shot caught him high in the chest. He toppled, horse rearing, crashing to the dust in a tangle of limbs and curses. Silence fell, broken only by the groan of the dying man. Amos arrived too late, posse in tow, but justice had been served raw. Rafe's saddlebags yielded clues. Letters from rail barons, contracts stained with blood. The gold, Clara handed it over, every eagle, to the sheriff. For the widow's fund in town. Let it buy something good. Word spread like prairie fire. The whispers turned to nods of respect. Elias Thorne's bride wasn't curse, she was steel. Weeks later, as autumn gilds the plains in amber waves, Elias and Clara stood at Sarah's grave. The oak had leafed out, acorns crunching underfoot. Clara laid wildflowers, goldenrod and aster, at the cross, her hand in Elias's. She'd have liked you, he said softly, wind tugging his hat. Strong, kind. Clara squeezed his fingers. And she'd want you happy. They walked back arm in arm, the ranch alive with new life. A foal in the corral, Jed's grin wider than the sky. No children yet, but hope bloomed, patient as seed in soil. That evening, by the roaring campfire, they danced slow, swaying, to the fiddle of wind through the pines. Laughter mingled with the crackle of flames. Love a quiet blaze that warmed the bones. In the end, the West didn't break them. It mended, stitch by stubborn stitch. But the prairie wind still whispers their names. Pause for emotion,